2 minutes ahead now.
It's like, yeah, it's kind of, that's 2 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes ahead. I think we might need a new clock. Yeah, I think we just need a new clock.
Dr. Residence. Simon and him were writing some email. He's a great doctor. Spot. Tell Gord to order not. You can be front and center. And I guess because I think before we had it back. Yeah. So we can see.
Say good night.
I'm trying to compare my clock to the one there. Okay, 3 o'clock. I will call to order. I'm calling to order. Are we ready online too? I just want to make sure. I'll just wait to make sure. Okay. Okay, I will call to order this Committee of the Whole meeting of the Town of Gibsons Council, April 18th, 2023. We are honored to gather on the traditional territories of the Squamish Nation. And our first, we've got a number of presentations, including a development proposal later in the agenda. So welcome everybody here for those presentations. And our first presentation is Chief Rob Michael, Gibsons and District Volunteer Fire Department. And I'll just ask you to start after we approve the agenda. Moved by Councillor Kroll, seconded Councillor DeAndrade. All those in favor? The motion carries. Go ahead.
Mayor and Council, thanks for the opportunity to present to you today. Fire Department membership is at full strength with 45 members. 33 of those members are trained to full service with an additional 2 certified to exterior operations. A further 24 members have been certified as emergency vehicle operators. The focus of training for this quarter was continuation of the exterior training program, marina fires, wildland firefighting, and structure protection. The fire department responded to 76 calls for service in the first quarter, including several vehicle fires, multiple dryer fires, and a mutual aid call for a structure fire in Roberts Creek. The department also responded to 3 out-of-jurisdiction rescue calls requiring a provincial task number. The fire prevention team completed 31 fire and life safety inspections, conducted 16 referrals, and 4 fire investigations. With the transition to a new records management system, it is thought that the fire prevention team can recognize some efficiencies and the total number of completed inspections can increase in 2023. However, we're finding it is still taking some time for the team to get used to the new system. The fire department participated, along with other fire departments on the Sunshine Coast, in the BC Lung Association Climb the Wall fundraising event in Vancouver. The department also hosted several hall tours and visited local elementary schools. The SCRD fire departments were successful in securing a Community Emergency Preparedness Fund grant for firefighting equipment and training. Each department received $30,000 towards the purchase of new equipment and incident safety officer training. The SCRD was also successful in securing $750,000 Community Resiliency Investment Fund grant for the revitalization of the Fire Smart program. Both grants will be instrumental in assisting with regional and local fire protection. The fire department's newest command vehicle arrived at the end of March and has already been put into service. I'm happy to answer any specific questions on any fire department activities or projects.
Thank you, Chief Michael. Are there any questions from members of council? As always, it's a very thorough report, so I don't know if there's anything missed that we need to ask about. It's all. Councillor Kroll?
Thank you, Mayor White, and thank you for your report, Chief Michaels. I happened to visit Fire Hall 17 in Vancouver last term, and with the computer program they use, they're able to track
My head's not there.
all fire department vehicles, including yours, it appears. Because while we were touring the station, you had a call and we could actually see your vehicle moving up the highway on a map. So I'm assuming that all your vehicles have GPS tracking?
No, they do not. One single vehicle does have a tablet that is not in the vehicle currently, but it is a capability and a function that is available. We've brought it in as a trial, but it's proven to be complicated with the volunteer model that we have, so we haven't fully integrated that at this time.
Councillor Lumley?
Yeah, thanks for this. Just I'm just trying to wrap my head around. Maybe you can explain to me how the fire trucks work, like with respect to, unless because the one truck, it says it carries 400 imperial gallons of water, but it pumps 1,500 imperial gallons of water per minute. So it's got like basically 20 seconds of water. So is that? So are you hooking up to a water source and using this as an emergency? I'm just wondering how, I mean, clearly, and same with there's the other truck too. It's 800 gallons of water, and I get it. They only hold so much, but it seems like it's a lot of water getting pumped out really fast.
I'm just impressed you read my report so thoroughly. So I thank you for that. So my
Bit of
attention
math.
to detail was
He's got an accounting degree, eh?
there's some variables in there, right? So a standard hose line, for example, could operate anywhere between 65 or even less to 150 gallons per minute. The pump capacity is how much it could output at maximum. If we had several hose lines, feeding sprinkler protection systems, feeding additional fire trucks, right? So you're not wrong. At full capacity, we could exercise the tank very quickly. Generally, if we were not hooked into a water supply, that we would generally have a single or no more than 2 hose lines operating until such time we were able to give the truck the water it needed to then go at full capacity before we start adding additional water to the fires.
CEO Machado.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I just want to acknowledge the reference the chief makes to the training yard. That we've visited the site and are working to prepare a draft for council's consideration. The SCRD just to formalize this area here, which is, as you can see, quite crucial to the training. So we look forward to continue to do that.
Thanks for that additional information.
And I appreciated the support to wait for me as I ran on a call to come back to that meeting. So very accommodating with the staff.
Oh, yeah, that's
And
life. It's your
Mayor,
life.
if I could address one thing
Sure.
as well in the report, I noticed some raised eyebrows when I made mention of out of jurisdiction calls. And I could clarify on that if council wishes. But we do operate within our fire protection district, our boundaries. We can work outside of that through our mutual aid agreements with all the other neighboring departments on the Sunshine Coast. In areas of no established fire protection, the fire department is able to respond with provincial authority. So that provincial authority would work on the work safe coverage and liability insurance as we're operating outside of our established zone. However, a life safety threat needs to exist for us to get that approval. So if there's a fire in a trash can outside of our jurisdiction, we do not have the ability to respond. If there's a structure on fire where there's patients trapped, we then have that ability to respond until such time that life safety threat has been mitigated. One of the examples this last quarter was a resident outside of our fire protection district dismantling a recreational vehicle of some kind, and that vehicle collapsed on them. So the paramedics attended, asked for the fire department's assistance. We were able to get the approval to attend, removed the structure from the patient, and then the paramedics were able to get that patient back to our fire protection area where we had a helicopter landing zone set up. So there's a prescribed process, and I know that there are sensitivities around fire departments operating outside of their jurisdiction, but we do follow those provincial rules very closely and mindful that we can only do so much.
Thank you. And looks like there's been great work with, an ongoing challenge is always retention and recruitment, and looks like there's been good news on that front. Because I know that's, we've been talking a lot as a council about the housing crunch and the difficulty to maintain volunteers and workforce here. So I guess I'd like to commend the organization and being able to do that with the challenges we're all facing.
We've been very fortunate. One of the things, and I highlight the support for the volunteer firefighter benefits for health and dental. I think that's great, and that's a part of that retention efforts. I do try to highlight when we are losing people. I do try to mention a little bit of why, right? So we were having people who are leaving the community. Why is that? Or if people are coming in with training. In this last instance, we had lost one member, and that member moved across the country with their family. But I've maintained some conversations with that individual, and we're hopeful that she can put her skills to good use somewhere else. So we should feel good and proud about that. And very fortunate, we've got a big recruit class of 10 this year, and we'll do everything we can to hold on to that group and get them trained up.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Kroll, one more
Thank you, Mayor White.
question.
Councillor Dendretti and I attended the Fire Commission meeting this morning, and one of the things that came up is there are people in the community who still are unaware of the fact that it is a volunteer department. It's perhaps, new people moving into the community that have come from a paid service fire department. But I think, as a town who benefits from the work of these volunteers, I think we could, through our social media platforms, just reinforce that it is a volunteer department and, and acknowledge that that's the case.
Yeah, maybe that tag on your jacket there should say Gibsons Volunteer Fire Department. Yeah, right. Okay, thank you very much, Chief Michael, and again for a
Thanks for
very
having me.
informative report. Thanks. Staff Sergeant Jennifer Prunty is next. And Maybe you can clarify too, if we call you staff sergeant or detachment commander or both?
Staff sergeant is the.
No,
best
okay,
way, yeah,
okay.
Detachment commander is the
Okay. All right.
You can just call me Jennifer, same as before. Now it is. Thanks, Mayor and Council, for having me for the update again. You did receive the written update, so I won't really get into great detail, but I'll provide a little bit of context and perhaps answer some questions about anything that you might have on that. So what you have is the total year end for Gibsons for 2022, as well as for the Sunshine Coast as a whole for 2022. And maybe I'll start with that because at the last quarterly update, we didn't do that. So just for context, just a little bit of the highlights there. The overall calls for service were down slightly to 1,994. Excuse me. Mental Health Act and Check Wellbeing calls were up 36%. And shoplifting, we saw a rise in shoplifting as well. We're subsequently seeing a drop in the shoplifting calls for this quarter. So we believe that that's accountable primarily to there were two property offenders that had been quite active in all the communities of the district, and they have since relocated. So I think we will continue to see shoplifting drop. I'm optimistic that we will, but also we are in general going to see it continue to be higher than it was last year on account of businesses that were closed during COVID due to the restrictions. So. Impaired driving continues to be a concern. We see an increase in that for 2022. For the year end, it was up from 25 in 2021 to 60, and that's just for Gibsons. Also, we're seeing the same trend continue in this past quarter with the impaired driving at 21 for the last 4 months. So. That's a concern that we're focusing on now. There's a couple of reasons why that would be up. Our investigators, we have some junior investigators who are particularly keen to proactively go out and look for people who are impaired driving. So that's part of the reason, but the other part is perhaps a messaging that we need to do a little bit more of an impactful messaging to the community about the dangers around drinking and driving. So you will see some messaging coming out from us about that in the coming months. And then just moving on to the quarterly stats just for the period of January to March of this year. As I noticed or noted, shoplifting is down, and in general, our file count is also down. So that's a good thing. One thing that is not reflected in the stats that we are seeing as a bit of a trend is some youth sort of gathering in the evenings, primarily on weekends and school holidays. It's a trend that we're noting and that we're paying attention to in terms of proactively enforcing. And these are not necessarily Gibsons youth. I should point out that this is youth from all across the coast that are coming into the community because the bus service does run quite late. So they're gathering to party in general at the beach, but when the weather turns, they go to the stores that are open, which is, there's 3 gas stations that are open, and that's kind of where the trouble tends to hub. So it is a concern for us, just because some of the staff don't feel safe when there are these large numbers of youth there. There's some shoplifting going on, and it's not necessarily being reported right away to us. So we've ramped up our presence on weekends, especially if we notice that there's a lot of kids moving, kind of segueing down into the Gibsons area. So. And lastly, on a very positive note, we had a vacant crime prevention position. It went vacant for almost 2 years, and that's been filled now. So we have a community police officer. His name's Constable Cole Vanderhelm. So he has been out and so far he's been focusing on fraud awareness for seniors. So he's given a few presentations in Gibsons. Myself and Corporal Atui came in his stead to give a presentation at the New Horizons Center, which was it was great. I really enjoyed the questions. They were very thought-provoking questions about some community issues and policing issues as a whole, and just a chance for me to explain the business that we do and why we make some of the decisions we make. So we are looking for more and more opportunities to engage with the public in those ways. Not just one or two of us, but all of us taking a turn at it. So. From a staffing perspective as well, I am happy to report that we have only one vacancy, and it's the position that I left when I promoted into this position. So we have one sergeant position that is going to probably go to promotion to fill. So that might take a while to fill that position, but other than that, we're fully staffed now.
Thank you for the report. I'll look to Councillor DeAndrade.
Thank you, Mayor. I saw the statistic of missing persons, and to me, it's quite in Gibsons in the first semester, like 6 people, and on the Sunshine Coast around 21. Could you elaborate a little bit? Are these people with mental illness or adults, children? What's the situation?
Yeah,
know some of those situations myself, but yeah.
Yeah,
I'm sure
well,
you'll,
Mayor White, you're probably very aware that, sometimes these are just people that haven't been heard from and need a check-in, and, there's different community agencies that may have ongoing contact with these people, but they haven't seen them, so we are the folks that come in and sort of connect the dots to make sure they haven't completely disappeared off the radar. So we have a number of steps that we take to try and locate them. Generally, these are not nefarious missing person type things. They're just, they haven't been seen for a while, so they also fall into the check well-being category too.
So
I'll moderate, but just to, I think we can also confirm that all of these people were found and probably within a matter of days, right? Like very.
Correct,
Yeah,
yes, we
yeah,
don't
like-
have any outstanding current ones.
Yeah, just to clarify that, I think that's important for people to know, yeah. Councillor Lumley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just the difference, maybe just the difference between the mental health flag and check well-being, like what segregates those two things? I know they're quite high, the calls and everything, so I just so I can understand it.
For sure, and they're the hardest ones to capture in terms of statistics, which is why I sort of look at the two together, because check well-being can be anything from like we just described, a person that hasn't been seen for a while, to a person having some sort of a mental health crisis. And they're not necessarily apprehendable under the Mental Health Act, but they are having some sort of a mental health crisis. So the way that it gets scored within our system, it's difficult to draw out from that what the specifics are on the check well-beings. They really do run the range of things. So when it's actually scored as a mental health file, that means that there was actually apprehendable or Section 28 of the Mental Health Act could apply in that situation.
Mr. Thompson?
My question is as it relates to the fraud increase. Is that still, as it was on last report, primarily internet fraud? And so it's off-coast offenders and coast victims?
Yeah, correct. And a lot of them are not actual frauds that have fully been committed. They're attempted frauds that the person didn't give the money. But they are the internet scams, the email scams. Yeah.
Councillor Kroll.
Thank you, Mayor White. Thank you for your report. I attended the Chamber of Commerce AGM, and Constable Van Helm did a presentation there, which was very well received amongst the business merchants that were there. And I think it's his presence in the community is going to be a great asset, particularly also his engagement with youth. So well received.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your report. It's especially to see both the year-end statistics of last year and being able to compare to the beginning of this year and previous years is really helpful. And I also want to once again thank thank the detachment for their responsiveness in terms of any time I hear anything from within the town or within council that we need to check on. It's the RCMP detachment's been very responsive in picking up the phone and giving us answers on community concerns that come up. So yeah, it's been great.
Thank you.
Annie Wise.
Presentation coming up. Is this on? Oh. Great. Little click. Oh yeah, it works. Alright.
Just the base of it, yeah.
Thank you. Clearly, I've been doing a lot of this on Zoom. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Thank you for having me. My name is Annie Wise, and I'm the Executive Director for Sunshine Coast Tourism. And I do want to acknowledge that I'm joining you here today from the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation, and that the Sunshine Coast as a destination represents from Howe Sound all the way up to Desolation Sound. And within that, we also have the Shuswap Nation, Tla'amin, Homalthco, and Klahoose Nations. Thank you for the opportunity to present. I trust you received our annual report, and but I know there's some new faces on council since I last presented to you, and so I wanted to just briefly share a few slides with you, and of course answer any questions you might have. I'm following along my notes on my computer here at the same time as this, so we'll see how I do. So Sunshine Coast Tourism is a nonprofit association, specifically what we call a destination marketing organization. Our mission is to build a strong and sustainable tourism economy in the region that's consistent with the values of our residents. We work to achieve that mission through three primary pillars, what we call destination marketing or destination promotion, destination development and management, and by increasing awareness of the value and contribution of tourism amongst our government, our residents, and businesses in the region. We represent the tourism industry and stakeholders, like I said, from Howe Sound to Desolation Sound, and with that collaborative support from all the local governments within, including the Cathet Regional District and Sunshine Coast Regional District, and then the three municipalities being, of course, the town of Gibsons, District of Sechelt, and the city of Powell River. We are governed by a volunteer board of directors and supported by a small full-time staff team of 4. And we have 3 primary strategic documents guiding our work that I linked in the report that I sent you, and it's also publicly available on our website. It's our 5-year strategic business plan, a 10-year destination development strategy, and a regional visitor services strategy. These documents all, of course, touch different, pieces of tourism and the work that happens to building a destination. But one of the key themes across all those documents is the focus on what we call geographic and seasonal dispersion of visitors. So really making sure that visitors aren't coming all to one place all at the same time, but rather spreading them out. We know it's no secret to anyone here that we have very strong summer season with tourists, and our goal as an organization is to help spread that out throughout the year, but also geographically across the coast where there's capacity and when we need it. When managed well, tourism has amazing benefits to the community. It provides an environmental there's environmental initiatives to protect the environment. We have amazing cultural offerings that we wouldn't necessarily have without tourism. And of course, it can build thriving communities and really support both the resident experience as well as, of course, visitors coming in and the business climate. But we know it has to be managed well. We know that, in the same way, having everyone come at the same time or visitors that are coming that don't respect our local values is not good either. And so we're working carefully to try and manage both that short-term need to, to support the economy, but also making sure that there's a long-term sustainability vision in all of that. And that's something we do collaboratively. Certainly as an organization, we can only do our part of that. And so we work closely, of course, with local government, with our stakeholders and residents in the community to try and do that really well. And on that point, I just love this quote from Mark Twain, that travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness, and many of our people need it sorely on those accounts. As a nonprofit, we receive both public and private funding from three primary sources: our local governments, our stakeholders, and our visitors. For over 10 years, each of our local governments has provided a collective amount of approximately $80,000, with $40,000 coming from each end of the Sunshine Coast. So in the northern Sunshine Coast, the Cathet Regional District and City of Powell River contribute $40,000, and on the southern Sunshine Coast, the SCRD, Town of Gibsons, and District of Sechelt contribute $40,000, with shares within that based on a population percentage. And historically, the contribution from the Town of Gibsons has been $7,200, and we haven't asked for a change in that amount in over 10 years now. We use that funding as a springboard to then manage the municipal and regional district tax program, also called the 2% MRDT, which is a tax paid by visitors to the community on their accommodation room bill, and it returns to Sunshine Coast Tourism as the designated recipient for use on tourism marketing projects and promotions. Our current program, the MRDT program, is a 5-year program, and it's in place currently until August of 2026, in which time we would need to renew. And as part of that legislation that guides it, the MRDT legislation does state that core funding from local government must continue. And so that was the primary reason for the request I forwarded today to return our annual funding agreement to that $7,200. I understand at a recent budget meeting it was voted to decrease that, but unfortunately I've checked with both the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Tourism, Arts, Culture and Sport to clarify the language around that, and they did state that annual funding contribution amount must continue, or we risk jeopardizing and losing the program altogether. So I do put that request back to you. I certainly understand the challenges the town is under with respect to budgeting, and I don't envy that position. It's, again, one of the reasons why we haven't requested increases in funding. And I know it can be a bit challenging, as through the MRDT and the success there, we do have, significantly more revenue coming through that program that we had prior to implementing the MRDT. But one of the reasons why the program is set up that way is to make sure that there's a healthy balance between the contributions of visitors and the accommodation properties in the local community, along with local government, and ensuring there's a balance of voices in that respect. One other note I wanted to make about the MRDT was that in late 2018, the province did update the legislation to include affordable housing as another use of MRDT revenues, and not all of it, but a certain portion of it that's collected specifically by Airbnb. And so that money does come to us, and we send a portion of it back to local government for use on affordable housing initiatives. So that money goes to the SCRD, who is using it on a contract with the Sunshine Coast Affordable Housing Society, who I understand is currently supporting projects in Franklin Road and Shaw Road for Gibsons. In the last 4 years, that amount has added up to approximately $250,000, with another $109,000 on the way based on 2022 revenues. We do expect that amount might decrease in future years based on the new short-term rental regulations. So that's the very broad strokes, big picture of who we are. I wanted to share a couple of quick updates from our programs, as well as some industry stats, just to give you an idea of what's been happening. So one of the key stats we look at is BC Ferries passenger arrivals. In Langdale, you can see on the screen the year-over-year changes in passenger arrivals coming from Horseshoe Bay into Langdale. And while 2022 passenger numbers have not yet surpassed pre-COVID-19 levels, the vehicle numbers have, which is an interesting shift in the way that people are traveling. And we, of course, don't know from BC Ferries data what percentage of those passengers are visitors versus residents, but we're actually working on a cell phone mobility study to help parse that out. And so it's still in progress. I don't have the final complete numbers for 2022 on that yet, but we do know now that domestic visitor arrivals, so those trips originating within Canada, at the Langdale terminal count for a baseline of at least 460,000 visitor trips annually. Plus there are additional visitors that we can't capture within that data, like those that don't use cell phone mobility tracking, international visitors, or people that are arriving outside of BC Ferries, like through float planes and private boats. So I hope that when that study is complete, I can come back and share with you some updated numbers so you have a better sense of how many visitors are coming into your community every year. And then this is a quick look at annual room revenues across the Sunshine Coast. This is all the accommodations both within the Sunshine Coast Regional District and the municipalities and the Cafet Regional District. And in the blue is the traditional accommodations, so more like your hotels, motels, that sort of thing. And in the green would be your short-term rental revenues. And even though you don't see green in 2018 and prior, that doesn't mean there weren't short-term rentals, just the province didn't collect that data, so I don't have that information to share. So just wanted to point that out, as the graph can seem a bit misleading if you're not aware of that. But you can see that bit of a dip in 2020 and then a very strong increase coming up to 2022. So even though the total number of visitors has not yet reached the pre-pandemic levels, the spending has clearly exceeded it. So there's a number of different factors into why we think that that's happening, both the increase in room rates, as well as we're seeing a lot of visitors that are staying longer because they can work remotely while they're here. Just to conclude on these stats, support for the tourism industry, it might seem like everything is going well when I share a graph like this, but we're really in a very important and crucial period. Rebuilding from the pandemic is more important than ever as we face global pressures such as rising costs, inflation, recession, labor constraints, that we rebuild a resilient industry. And so we really look for local community support in doing that well, and also to make sure we're doing that sustainably. So lastly, just a couple quick slides to show you some updates from our primary programs. So this is a look, just some screen grabs from our new website that we updated and launched in December. As the top travel site for the region, we welcome approximately 500,000 unique individuals to the website each year, and flow through the website and serve about 175,000 referrals to local businesses through the website. So if you haven't seen it, head over to sunshinecoastcanada.com and take a look when you get a chance. In addition to our website, we of course run multiple promotional campaigns over the course of the year, targeted mostly at Lower Mainland, some Alberta, Vancouver Island, and Seattle markets. And we're really, again, encouraging them to explore the Sunshine Coast when we need it. So this is a look at our winter and spring campaign, just one ad example, but of course we use a mix of print and traditional advertising, TV, and lots of different types of digital advertising as well. So that's just one example. And the results from that campaign showed a 24-to-1 return on investment based on verified visits that we again get through mobility data. So those verified visits are when we serve somebody our ads digitally, and they actually click on the ad and then physically make their way to the Sunshine Coast within a period of 90 days. We count them as a verified visit. There are certainly other people that are traveling here during that time, and people that might click on one of our ads and travel later, or people that don't click but see it and then still come. So it's not everybody, but it's that verifiable piece. And then quickly on the destination development front, we are working hard to ensure that that long-term piece is there. So things like putting up new map signage boards at both the Little River and Comox as people are coming over to Powell River, and the Earls Cove ferry terminals. We did successfully apply to the Federal Active Transportation Fund to extend a feasibility study that was started by TRAC, Transportation Choices. Their study covered looking at an all ages and abilities active transportation path from Langdale to Seashelt, and we applied to the federal fund to extend that study from Seashelt to Lund, and so that work is underway and will be completed by the end of the year. And we also have a Destination Development Council that CIO Machado is graciously sat on that council with us, and that group meets about once a month, and it includes a variety of stakeholders in the region, including folks like BC Parks, Rec Sites and Trails, Destination BC, and local community members as well, to help ensure that we're in alignment as far as grant opportunities as it relates to destination development. And then lastly, we've continued our Sustainable Sunshine Coast initiative, which works to both educate visitors about key issues such as water conservation, wildlife interactions, wildfire safety, leave no trace principles, and also to support local businesses in communicating those same messages to their guests. So not just coming from Sunshine Coast Tourism, but coming from the businesses as well. And then last but not least, I should say, on the visitor services front, and I did want to acknowledge that my colleague Wendy Wright is here in the back if she wants to give a wave. Wendy is our visitor and member services manager, and we have an incredible team of staff. Of course, we do operate the Gibsons Visitor Center through a fee-for-service contract with the town, and it's a very strong complement to our overall strategy. We're pleased to see such a strong return in in-person visits into the visitor center, and it really provides a significant value in the overall traveler experience. I know a lot of people tend to think that, doesn't everyone just use their cell phone now? But really, we're seeing great interaction in the visitor centers. We know that visitors that come see us in person end up staying longer, spending more, and generally rate their overall experience on the Central Coast higher than those that didn't stop in a visitor center. So really important complement to the whole mix. And that's a lot. So I'm going to stop there. Thank you so much for your time. It's very difficult to distill a year's worth of work into like 10 minutes, and I probably went a little over, so thank you. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Great. Before I go to questions, I'll just respond and clarify to a couple things. One piece is that regarding the MRTT funding going to affordable housing, I can confirm that none of it is going to those affordable housing projects in Gibsons. The town of Gibsons has actually been significantly funding those projects through our affordable housing fund. However, that money is going towards funding a coast-wide housing coordinator. That's where all those funds are going to that position. And then just regarding the funding, that is something we can follow up on with the provincial government ourselves. The Minister of Municipal Affairs has actually announced in the legislature yesterday that she's planning to have a meeting with me on behalf of the town. So that we will put that on the agenda to clarify, because as you correctly state, the wording is kind of vague, and we need clarification from the provincial government on it. It talks about things like current funding, and it's not clear what that's referring to. So. We'll follow up on that in that meeting. And Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor. Great report. The data collection is fabulous. It's so interesting seeing how much coverage you actually get into that report is so amazing. So it brings me back to the BC Ferries data. I'd like to hear more about that with the breakdown of just having a more clear data understanding of the traffic going back and forth. When do you anticipate that survey, that iPhone app survey, will be in place?
Yeah, so it's ongoing. We're working with Destination BC on that, and I'm sorry, should I have directed that through you, Mayor White? Sorry. We're working with Destination BC. They have a subscription to an organization, a data collection organization called Environics, and it's basically from the endpoint of like when you want collections. So say we want to get through the end of December 2022, there's about a 3-month lag, and then it takes time to compile the raw data that the research team at Destination BC receives into a report that makes sense to me or probably very many other people. And so that's what we're waiting on. So at this point, I would suspect we're probably getting pretty close to having that 2022 data complete. And the other thing that we've asked the research team to support us with is while it's providing that, baseline of what, the number of those trips that are visitors that are coming through, we're hoping that we can have, a bit better of a breakdown of where those visitors originated from, because the data does have that baked into it. And so, to understand, is this all, primarily Lower Mainland versus, say, Alberta or otherwise. And then the last piece, of course, is that one day we hope that we can add international, U.S. and international visitors to that mix, but we don't have that at this time. Yeah, thank you.
Councillor DeAndrade.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm on your website right now, and I'm quite amazed with the program, because you're showing events like that's happening today, tomorrow, and even the bingo, I think in Seychelles. So how much are you able to cover the whole coast? It seems quite comprehensive, but...
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, I've been really lax on
Sorry too.
the speaking there. Just to make it clear for the speakers as well, it gets confusing to try to speak through the chair, so we can address the questions through me, so we can coordinate. Yeah.
Sorry. Yes, so we have an opportunity for individuals that they can enter in their own event on the website, and then we just review it and approve it. We do try to keep it somewhat limited to events that would be of interest to visitors. We don't typically add like fundraisers and town meetings and things like that, but generally outside of that, we certainly don't capture every last thing that's happening across the coast, but I like to think that we have a pretty good mix, and especially as it gets closer to the day, it's a pretty full calendar.
Thank you.
Councillor Kroll.
Thank you, Mayor White. I recently attended the Accessibility and Tourism Conference at the Queen Elizabeth Theatre in Vancouver. And one of the things that became really apparent was for people who don't have their own vehicle, and when you consider that 20% of the Canadian population have accessibility problems, that there's a huge portion of our population that don't have access to coming to the Sunshine Coast as a visitor. So we have extended an invitation to tourism to work with our accessibility committee. So I just wanted to say we're really looking forward to working with you.
Okay, on that note, thank you for the report.
Thank you.
The annual report. Now we're on to staff reports, and we have the Director of Finance Grants of Assistance Program 2023. I need to get it going on my committee of the whole here. Councillor Cole, you have a question on this, just to start?
Yes, Mayor White. I'm just wondering if, in light of the question that we may have with respect to funding for tourism and the responsibility for it, and because we've set a budget percentage increase based on where we thought we were at, I'm just wondering if we should consider deferring grants of assistance till we know where we're at.
Oh, okay. I don't think we'll need to do that based on, but I guess we'll see where we're at, but it's not going to affect our budget. I mean, there's other, if we need to find funding for this in the future, it's not going to be we're not going to have to do the budget over again, I don't believe.
It wouldn't be it could be an amendment, those funding sources, if there was no changes to the operations in the budget, then it would be a draw from surplus for this year and then build it again for future years.
Yeah.
But no change to the tax rate.
It is something to consider that there are ongoing discussions with both this program and also the Community Services, Victim Services program, which could possibly come from policing surplus that we're collecting already. But just the what level we should be funding that, considering we're a community under 5,000, that's an ongoing exploration. But whereas there could be funding from this line that helps fund both those issues in the future. I have it called up here. Director of Finance, do you have any introduction to this report?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just keep it really brief. This just clarifying, this is round one of the grants of assistance. We have council received 12 applications this year, and on page 2 we listed. So the budget this year is $10,000, and as per policy, the maximum eligible grant per organization is 10%, so that brings it to $1,000 per organization. So on page 2 of the report, we listed the amount that was originally requested by the organizations, and then we adjusted as staff to limit or to match the policy. So if it was over 1,000, we dropped the eligible amount to 1,000, and if it was under, we kept it as is, and that was just to clarify what they're eligible for under the policy cap. The report does include a list of the historical funding that the various organizations have received in the past. And the individual applications with all the detail in the programs was circulated to you under separate cover. On page 3, there is a bit of information on repeating and repeat applications or organizations that are receiving alternate funding. And that's really just for information for you to have some context within this discussion. So I'll leave it to that and wait to see what you guys want to do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I did try to do some work over the last week in approaching each individual counselor to get input on your suggestions to work towards a decision, since we can do that one-on-one, getting input from between the mayor and a counselor. The overall, I think one strong sentiment I heard is that we really, and I know that this has been brought up in the past, is really need to change this program overall, the policy. And I know it's been tweaked in the past in different directions, and I think this council wants to see that done again. So that's something we'll certainly be needing to do in the next year. And in general, the consensus seemed to be not to fund all these projects and to be fairly modest in our support this year, considering there are a lot of cost pressures, I think, and there are a lot of repeating programs on here, and kind of, organizations coming back with just kind of a tweak to get more funding, which we're not continuing to get ongoing funding, which was not necessarily the intent of the policy, it seems, depending on different councillors' reading of the policies. And I guess so I definitely heard that, and as has been raised in previous budget discussions too, I've heard that we're concerned with kind of funding organizations that are already getting tax exemptions, and also already getting budget lines in some cases too, whereas there's been cases in the past where if an organization continues to come for grants of assistance, council said, well, we'll give them a budget line so they don't need to come back for grants of assistance, and yet they do anyway. So that's a concern of council as well. So I did try to reach out kind of a consensus. Nobody had the exact same suggestions. So I'll put forward what I heard from councillors as certainly what seemed to emerge as a consensus. No one kind of said the same of like, let's fund one project at the maximum of $1,000. There were no really strong consensus supports for that. So it seems I'm suggesting to try to reach a consensus that we stick to $500 grants. That's what seemed to come up. And furthermore, that everybody seemed to agree on keeping it low overall, and that would potentially leave space for other things that we might have to fund, such as if we do need to increase tourism or give community services more funding. So those items were, or the consensus suggestions seemed to be trying to bring everybody together when they weren't the same. The parish of St. Aidan and St. Bartholomew All Who Hunger program for $500. Deer Crossing the Art Farm Copper Circle program, $500. Gibsons Public Art Gallery. I'm just trying to find that here. SC Pride Exhibition Program, $500. The Sunshine Coast Hospice Society, Healing Through the Art of Writing and Storytelling, $500. Jack and Jill, Parent Preschool Art Tables, $500. And the Driftwood Theatre, program here, I'm looking for that. That was for their summer event. Oh, yeah, summer outdoor community theater for $500. So, and that's for a total of 3,000. So that was trying to bring together everyone's suggestions, because some of you said 1,000 for a certain project, and then some said 0 for the same project. So that's the attempt here. So I can put that forward as a recommendation, unless there are any objections, strong feelings of changing those. Seeing none. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I've heard everybody's input, so I'll put that forward as a motion. Did we capture all that? Are there any questions?
I do have it captured, I think, and we can always follow up with you afterwards to confirm, but I have a $3,000 total.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Councillor DeAndretti?
Thank you, Mayor. I think in the past, we have always struggled with the grants of assistance.
Yeah, we need a new system. Everyone agrees on that part.
Yes, and we tried. I think the last council we tried, but to me is if we have a criteria, you want to stick with the criteria to make decision-making easier. And what I find is we tell in our criteria that we don't finance repeated programs, but then people apply with repeated programs So in one way, I thought, okay, if it's a revamped version of the program, that could be considered a new program for the next year. But I think we need just to make a decision and define what is a repeated program. And if you come with phase one.
Sorry, I just want to do one piece of business at a time here. I think we should talk. It's totally relevant to talk about how we should revise it in the next year. But I have put forward a motion, and I need a seconder for it, and then we can, yes. Okay, seconded by Councillor Kroll. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor? The motion carries. And let's certainly talk about how we can, I know I've heard a lot of ideas in the past, like 2 councils ago, there were a lot of ideas about changing this program that I still remember. Councillor, so continue. Councillor DeAndretti.
I think in all these issues is a matter of definition, and if we are struggling, so we just need to pay attention. What is the definition of an ongoing program and because I feel this is always a little bit uncomfortable because you want to support your organization, but then you have the criteria and becomes more the judgmental thing, so.
Thank you. It's something we're definitely going to work on. It'll be a priority. Other input right now? We'll definitely be seeking further input into how to improve the program in the future. Now on to 4.2. First, we're going to look to representatives from the developer of 421 to 445 Gower Point Road to make a presentation to us about this proposal, and then we'll look to their planning department to address the staff report.
Okay, we're on. Hello, my name is Nicole Hagedorn, and I'm speaking on behalf of Gibsons Village Developments, a company that was founded nearly 2 years ago with a special idea for Lower Gibsons. The company is made up of members from the Longman and Hagedorn families, and we are pleased to present this before the committee today. David Longman and I first met in preschool in Roberts Creek Elementary in the early 1970s. Yes, that's 50 years ago. Our families have been good friends ever since, and we've always talked about doing things together, but for the last many years, what we have done together is worked in service for the community and give backs. On the Sunshine Coast, as a group, we have owned and operated retail, commercial, and service businesses from Secret Cove down to Gibsons. We are proud of our many developments that we have done on the Sunshine Coast and specifically in Gibsons. We are excited to embark on this new collaboration and work with the town and our community on this project. From the beginning, our mandate was to be upfront and transparent in our communication regarding this project And we are also pleased to stay local, working with all local contractors and people helping us get this vision off the ground. So with that, I'm going to introduce Peter Troyhout from Mobius Architecture, and he's going to give the presentation of our proposal. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Nicole, and Mayor and Council. So this? Okay. So I thought what I would do today is I know Leslie Ann and Katie are going to give you a lot of technical background and policies, but what I thought I would do is give you a little bit of background about how we arrived at this plan. That may be helpful for you to understand, how did we arrive at this plan? So I'll talk a little bit about the site in context, the site planning, a little bit about the building design, and then the landscaping. So the first thing we looked at when we started this project is look at the location. It's a very prominent location in Lower Gibsons, and then walk around the neighborhood. So I think everyone is familiar with where these sites are. So it's an amalgamation of a number of sites located right beside the Gibsons Public Market. This is an aerial view. You can see that the site basically is looking out into the harbor. It's surrounded on the upper part that you can see there is the future development of the George. We have the post office. We have a 3-story residential, multi-residential project, some commercial adjacent to it, a restaurant, and then the Gibsons Public Market. Here are just a few site pictures of the neighborhood and the site. The site is currently undeveloped. There are 2 old houses on the site, and then the remainder of the site is uninhabited. Sorry. So the other feature of this site is the harbor walk. So from the Gibsons Public Market, you can walk right along the seawall, basically all the way into Gibsons. Here's some pictures of some of the neighboring properties. They range from 1 story to 3 stories. This is the Gibsons Public Market. So starting with site planning, to look at the site circulation and the access and how we came up with this building configuration. So if we look at the amalgamated site, on the left there, you see Gower Point Road, and on the right, you have the waterfront and the waterfront walkway. If we look at a site section, so if we cut through that site, there's about a 3-meter difference from Gower Point Road down to the seawalk. So the dotted line represents a level line from Gower Point Road to the existing seawalk. So one of the first criteria in speaking with Nicole and David and the group was that they were really interested in keeping as much of the site as green space. And there's always that balance of parking and green space. So the decision was made to work with the site to basically put the parkade below the buildings. And so here you can sort of see a diagram where the parkade would be level with the seawalk, and there would be a ramp coming down from the Gower Point level. The original, we started to look at all types of different configurations, apartment-style buildings, townhouses, and there's always this challenge of, with the spectacular views that you have, is how do you get maximum use for the site, not just having a few of the units having a view and the remainder not having the view. So through the process of planning, we came up with the concept of addressing Gower Point Road with some smaller scale buildings, and then really trying to create this courtyard between 2 separate buildings. So mixing the scale up rather than one large building to have several different scaled buildings. So we have proposed a couple of townhouses with 4 units in each townhouse. And then towards the water, really 2 separate apartment buildings with a courtyard in between that would be accessible from Gower Point Road, so the public could in fact walk through the property and join into new developed waterfront. So this is the current site plan with some landscaping shown on there. So building A is basically a one-sided corridor. So rather than sort of having a double-loaded corridor facing what could potentially be the George right beside it, they're apartments that focus into the courtyard. 2 of them at the front are facing the waterfront. Then this building B is a 4-story building, which would be more a traditional single-loaded corridor. And then buildings C and D are these 3-story townhouses. So if we look at a site section diagram, if you see on the left facing Gower Point Road would be 3 stories, 2 stories with a 3rd story step back. The blue is the parkade, which even though it's essentially underground, it's really at grade with the seawalk and would be basically filled up and graded up against it to create the green space. The seawalk would be raised by about 1 meter to deal with future flooding. So that eventually, as all the sites get developed, they would all have this higher seawall along them. If we look now at a site section that sort of goes up into the upper part of the neighborhood, you can see at the top that shows where this section is taken. The middle section shows the site from the upper part of the neighborhood right down to the water. And then the lower one is sort of a more detailed, focused one. And then you can see as a gray shadow in the background, that's the George in the background, just to give you a context of heights of this development. So just to go through the building design a little bit, we'll talk about the layout. I won't get into detail too much. The massing and the materials. So this is the underground parking. There would be a ramp coming down from an upper road. Each of the buildings would have their own elevator lobby in the parkade. Bike storage is down there, so there's all the bicycles for the different buildings. Resident storage down there. So as I said, building A is this one-sided corridor, so it's an outside walkway, and then the units are facing into the courtyard. Building B, you can see it faces looking out over the market and into the courtyard as well. And then these are the townhouse units where they each have their own parking within the buildings. Here's just some sort of block diagrams showing it in the neighborhood. On the upper one, you can see the context of the other buildings around it, the parkade, and then this is just an aerial view to show you how the massing fits on the site. This would be a view from Gower Point Road as you're walking along. You can see into the development, the lobby on the building B, and the building on the left. These are the 2 townhouses. And the idea there too is that they address Gower Point Road. If someone had a home-based business, they would have a little entrance coming in from Gower Point Road to that property. This is a view on the walkway, again trying to bring a smaller scale to the waterfront, where you don't have a big, large, long building, but more of a smaller scale, the ends of basically building A and B. This, what you're looking at on the left, would be building A, where you have 2 townhouses facing the water with a 3rd floor step back. And you can see the grades built up around. So the courtyard is in fact a couple of meters higher than the walkway. And this would all be public, this part that would be developed in the front with a playground and some exercise equipment. And then the public could walk up and through the walkway and through the courtyard at the same time. Here's a view of the courtyard with some seating. There's 2 water features in this area that are collecting rainwater and dealing with stormwater. So all of the stormwater is dealt with on site. So these ponds, when it's heavy rains, would fill up and slowly disperse. They would look at using the water for irrigation of the plants there. So all of the planting would be low drought tolerant plantings. Oops. This is a view from the water where you can see the public area and then looking down into the courtyard again with the buildings, bringing in some of the West Coast wood features, breaking up the massing with smaller scale roofs. So building B is 4 stories and building A is 3 stories. And then this is a view actually from the Visitor Information Center looking down towards the site. Just to give you some context of the scale. So briefly about landscaping, really the idea was to integrate the waterfront with Gower Point Road and the residents. So we have the developed waterfront for the public to use, we have the internal courtyard, and then again landscaping around the perimeter of the building. The parkade would be totally hidden by terracing and berming up of landscaping against it, so you wouldn't see basically a parkade or anything. This is just a planting plan. And as I said, this interior courtyard sort of serves 2 purposes. One is this rainwater collection, and secondly, the stormwater management, and also becoming a feature for the residents as well. This is just a detail of that landscaped area. So that's my 5 minutes. Hopefully it wasn't longer. Happy to answer any questions, but we have Ben Tomaz here from Araya Geotechnical. If you have any concerns or questions about the aquifer and drilling and any technical questions, and Coralie Bryn from my office is here, who worked quite a bit on this. We're happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. I will look to council for questions. It's I know council does have a lot of concerns about aquifer protection and as does the community. So I thank you for bringing your geotechnical expert here. That's helpful to have that. Helpful to have that resource here. Yeah, sure. Councillor Thompson.
Mine is just related to the design. Is building A the closest building to the seawalk? And how far is that set back from the seawalk itself?
Building A is the top one. And so it's about, I think we're about 15 meters, 50 feet away from the seawalk with building A. Yeah. Building B, I think, is slightly further away.
Councillor DeAndretti.
I have a question regarding its beautiful design. And I know one of the things that I think about it's the air moving through the center and creating a current, air current. I can see that the fact that you have the building C in the back, probably it would slow down a little bit, but I know it's a concern.
Yes.
So how
I think, so yeah, so certainly wind is a concern if you've ever been in a place like that. So once we get into the detailed design, certainly nobody wants to, build something where there's going to be howling winds through there. So if you noticed in the design, there are these larger balconies. So it's not really a wind tunnel like a smooth surface. So once we get into the detailed design, they'll certainly look at how those balconies are designed to slow down winds. Some of the landscaping will help, but definitely the shape of the balconies and the roofs that are in that space will make a big difference. And as you said, building C will certainly impact that wind. So certainly that's something we're thinking about.
Okay, I'll just reassure council too that I'm sure the development team here is planning to stay throughout the rest of the meeting, so that if we do want to hear from staff first on how some of this this proposal relates to the OCP and other regulations, we can do that first and still ask the developers some questions as well as our staff, if that's council's preference.
Okay.
Which I think it is, because I don't see any other hands coming up. So, oh yeah, CA Machado.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just in relation to the aquifer investigative work there, we have received a proposal for investigative works into a drilling program, and we're having that be reviewed as we speak through Waterline and WSP. So we're expecting to get a final for that very, very soon here, and then we'll follow up with that.
Thank you. Any questions on that in particular? Okay, just seeing fingers on buttons. Okay, we'll go to our planning department to make staff's presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, I'm going to look specifically at the OCP and the zoning amendment for this property. So as Peter was explaining, this is an amalgamation of 6 properties. So you've got 421, 427, 431, 437, and 445 Gow Point Road, as well as Lot A. Now, we've got the George site is to the north of the property, and you've got the Gibsons Marina on the ocean side, and you've got Gibsons Public Market to the south of the property. Now there's currently 2 single-family homes on the property, one at 421 and one at 427 Gow Point Road. Now, the existing OCP land use has, as you can see in the brown area, this is the residential tourist accommodation designation, which intends to permit high-density residential or tourist accommodation, such as a hotel or inn, or some combination of these two. Now, Lot A, which is in the green, is designated as park and recreation. And as you can see, 445 Gow Point is designated commercial harbour. In terms of zoning, we have five of the lots are zoned tourist commercial 2. And then we have marine 1 for the Lot A. Now, tourist commercial allows for hotel use, while marine 1 allows for marine-related uses, for example, a service station, a service commercial use, or the selling of boats. And that use doesn't align with the official community plan. Now, the proposal looks to develop 69 residential units on the site, with 10 townhouses and 59 apartments. And this means that we need to have an OCP and zoning amendment to allow for the use. So the OCP amendment would be looking specifically at 445 Gow Point Road, and it would be looking at changing the designation from commercial harbour to residential tourist accommodation. Now, the draft bylaw is attached to the staff report as attachment C, and it should be noted that Lot A would remain as park and recreation, and it's not intended to be redesignated in this OCP amendment. In terms of the zoning amendment, this is broken down into 2 sections. So the 5 lots fronting Gow Point Road that are currently zoned for hotel use are proposed to be rezoned to multifamily residential zone 8, which is RM8 for short. And then Lot A, which is currently permits the marine-related uses, would be rezoned to parks, recreation, and open space. The zoning amendment bylaw is attached as attachment D to your staff report. Now, the RM8 zone is proposed to be a new zone into the zoning bylaw, and it's supposed to be used for any lot that's designated high-density residential in the town's OCP. Now, the zone itself aligns with that high-density residential designation. The base density in the zone is 75 units per hectare and has a bonus density up to 120 units per hectare with the provision of a community amenity contribution. Now, the harbour proposal is looking at a density of approximately 99 units per hectare, so it's not going up to the maximum that it could do. The maximum height is proposed to be 15 meters, except where fill is required by a geotechnical engineer, for example, to protect the aquifer. At that point, the building height could go up to a possible 16 meters. The zone would fall outside of the view protection area, which has a maximum building height in this area of 10 meters. And this is because the view protection area was put in prior to any flood construction level considerations came into play. The RM8 zone will include a section which speaks to site-specific conditions, and this outlines reduced front line setbacks and side lot setbacks for this particular proposal. Now, as per Council Policy 3.14, the applicant has provided an economic analysis of the project and has provided a community amenity contribution offer, which is $484,400. And the analysis is enclosed as attachment B to your report. And so if council is happy with this offer, then the offer should be endorsed, and that CAC would be payable after third reading prior to adoption. So this slide shows you the process that the OCP and zoning bylaw amendment would go through. Staff have provided 4 options for council's consideration. It's outlined on pages 16 and 17 of the staff report. Staff recommend option 2, which provides direction to staff and the developer that council is willing to consider this proposal to process it further. So option 2 gives the OCP and zoning bylaws first reading. It considers the OCP amendment in relation to the waste management plan and the town's financial plan. It would endorse a CAC offer of $484,400 and request that the applicant organizes and holds a public information meeting prior to the application coming back to council for second reading. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Thank you. Questions from council? I guess I'll ask one. I'm a bit confused about the need for one lot to become RM8 rezoning outside of the the tourist accommodation zoning that's in the OCP, and why that isn't an OCP amendment if it's actually a change from the OCP designation to RM8.
Okay, through you, Ms. Vett. If I understand correctly, you're asking about the zoning amendment? Yeah. Okay, so the zoning amendment is looking at all 5 lots fronting onto Gower Point Road. And so all of those lots that are currently, all of the lots that you can see up there that are shaded or hatched, sorry, these are currently zoned C2. And that only allows for a hotel use. So this proposal is looking at rezoning all of the C2 lots to the RM8 zone, which would allow for apartments and for townhouse use.
Okay, and where's the official community plan? Sorry, that designation.
Okay, this is the official community plan, and there is one lot, 445 Gower Point Road, that currently is designated commercial harbour, and that would need to be redesignated to the residential tourist accommodation.
Yeah, I understand that, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I just wasn't sure what the OCP designation is for the overall. Yeah, I thought it was also as residential or tourist accommodation, which is very general and takes in both of those uses. It's not specifically a specific zoning. Yeah.
So the tourist, so the residential and tourist accommodation designation speaks to tourist accommodation and to the high density residential that's outlined in the OCP.
Okay, that was the answer. Thanks. Councillor Kroll.
Thank you, Mayor White, and thank you both staff and the clients for the presentation. I like the look of the project. I think it's an interesting project, but something that concerns me and why I would be inclined to lean towards option one that has been presented to council is we're constantly being accused of bringing things to the public as a fait accompli. It's, it's been recommended by staff, and, I certainly appreciate all the work that staff put into this. But I really think we need to have some public feedback. It's just become such a daunting task in trying to bring things forward in the community and immediately being accused of it's a slam dunk. You've decided this in the back room. And I would really love to have a public engagement session with the developer and with staff, because staff have a lot of background information. So I think, for my 2 cents worth at this point, I would be in favor of option one as presented by staff. We have an ADP panel. This hasn't even come to the ADP yet. So, but I think it's, I think it's really important as some public feedback. There was a very unfortunate past history with this property, with a lot of work was put in by staff and the developer, and to use the line, the villagers came out and they weren't happy. So I think if we're going to start the process properly, we need to consult with the community.
I'm a bit confused by the options. That completely touches on my confusion about the options, because, I understand work has already been done to work with the developer, as our CAO touched on. But I also understand typically, the first reading process is for council to say, are we generally interested in looking at this at all or not? And you can kind of give the developer a, no, we're not, and less money is spent and less resources are spent for both sides. And but if we want to say, sure, we're interested in having a look at a development, and I've been through developments before where you don't go past first reading. Like the first reading, second reading never happens, because perhaps one reason is that first reading is attached to a number of requirements or interests, explorations that council wants to look into, and we don't get there. So my general feeling is usually you put forward that kind of interest from council in good faith and let's do more work on this in order to do the public engagement, in order to answer some questions, in order to do geotechnical studies, everything else, after first reading, once you do first reading. But is the reason that option A was included is because the developers basically already agreed to do that, or I'll ask our staff that, because it's a bit of a different process to do public engagement. Well, and it also says public engagement prior to first and second reading, which is probably the most confusing part to me. So I see, and I want to be really clear that I hear you, Councillor Kroll, and I also, my feeling is that we could do first reading and still do exactly what you're looking for, Councillor Kroll, in immediately. That helps us, I think, to start with the public engagement, public participation, and that kind of format that you're talking about too is exactly what I'm interested in doing, in having both public dialogue from both having a public information session, which we always require of developers, but also having some town-led public dialogue on the process as well, and kind of coinciding those two things. So I'll just look to staff about my questions about what option A really is, how that could work.
So option A or option one is not typical. We wouldn't normally put that recommendation forward. Typically, first reading is the first step for council to say, yeah, we're going to put this on the table and we're going to move it forward. which is why option 2 is the recommendation. But we were directed to put that option on the table so that council could hear back from the community and get some feedback before moving to first reading.
And second reading, it says.
And second reading at that point, because we have received the CAC offer. We received the CAC offer the day we were publishing the report.
Yeah.
So at that time, we quickly amended this report. Option 1 originally said, was an option to go out for public engagement prior to first reading, and then we'd hope to receive that CAC offer either after first reading or before second reading.
Okay. And I accept, Councillor Kroll, I accept, what you're saying, that some people in the community are interpreting first reading differently from what it actually is. But I don't know if we should accept that interpretation or say, no, actually first reading's this is just saying that we're starting a process and we're going to start engaging people. We're going to start seeking expertise, professional reports on these issues. I tend to hope that we stick to what the process should be. But I've got Councillor DeAndretti next on the speaker's list, and Councillor Lumley.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I think what happens, at least from my experience, is when we have a development at this scale, usually the developer goes to the community, introduce the project, even before, just an idea to gather feedback, and perhaps that's the first public engagement. And in this case, I think it didn't happen. It's a beautiful project, no doubt, and I can see there's a lot of thought on that. I have concern because excavations in this site is a huge issue. And council cannot know how much density is possible in this site because of the technical limitations. So in this regard, I find that it's counterproductive even to accept a proposal that we have no idea. Perhaps there has to be many amendments because we haven't received any reports. And even the report that was presented, the flood hazard assessment, which is at 5.35 meters, our technical report already says 5.9. So to me, just to accept, and given I agree that when the developer comes to council, the first reading is a way of saying, yeah, we want to consider this project. But I'm hesitant because of the history that this community have, the specificities of this site, the fragility, the impact. And also in this report, I don't see anything regarding the floodplain, right? We say we are just crafting a strategic plan to talk about climate resilience is a first priority. We are the top municipality in Canada with regard to natural asset management, and we have a report that doesn't even show where the floodplain is. What's the issues with the site? And even an overview. So in this regard, I don't feel comfortable even in moving. Obviously, we want to accept after we get the studies and we have the feedback, because I can anticipate that perhaps location of buildings may have to change. I don't know, maybe height, density, I don't know. So to me, I don't feel comfortable even moving this without, we receive the reports, we digest the reports, and there's a first engagement with.
I hear you. I guess that's, that again just leads me to what my initial concern is, like, can we, if we want to ask for a whole, a number of reports on this, can we even do that before first reading? I mean, that's typically we follow a process where we say, okay, we're interested in this project, and then we ask for more, and then we do a public information meeting after first reading. And I'll to our Director of Planning.
Thank you, Mayor. So typically you would give the bylaw a first reading to get it on the table, and then you could ask for reports that you'd like to receive prior to second reading. So then at that point, you can get the information you need in order to make a decision on whether this is the appropriate land use in that location. And at that point, we could tweak the bylaws if we need to respond to a professional report that has been received. But the first step is typically first reading.
Yeah, and then I'm concerned too that, I mean, I think to properly engage the public, it would help to have those reports. I mean, that's, so I mean, the concept of saying, let's do public engagement first before we even have the reports isn't logical to me. I've got Councillor Lumley next.
Yeah, thanks for the report, and staff as well, through the mayor. Yeah, I guess I was a little confused. Like, I agree with both Councillor Crowell and Councillor DeAndretti. My confusion is like the order of operations, like in the process. It's like, okay, like, I know I'm not even going to discuss, or we're not here to discuss form and character or anything like that, but I mean, we're going to start a zoning and an OCP amendment, which take a lot of time and effort and money, before you can't even know anything can be built there, or what's suggesting to be built can be built there, or that anybody wants what's going to be built there. And this is not my reflection on what you guys have proposed, for sure. It's gorgeous, right? Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'll just stare at you. And
Just maybe say you can
your
say,
eyes.
you can
Well, I
call
was
me the
looking at
guy
the
instead of say
screen,
you
so-
guys over
Oh,
there.
okay, you guys, yeah, sorry, you guy. But that was my kind of quandary here, was like, it's the same thing. It was like, but now that on our discussions, I hear that, I like those reports too, before making like major decisions. But and before staff going through a whole bunch of exercises, before the developer spending more money or needless money. It was just the order of operation. Like, that's, I just need maybe some clarity, because I mean, I lived through the George, you lived through the George, we all lived through the George. And if I can do anything, I don't want to ever do that again. And if we can, and we've got full control of what we can do here, and we should learn from our lessons. And I just hope that we can put that into practice. But I completely agree with, well, probably what's already been said here. So I guess we're just deciding. I actually think it's a good idea, possibly to move it, but then require these reports to be done, but prior to meeting with the public. So if that can be done, that makes the most sense from what I've heard today.
Councillor Thompson too.
I believe as council members, we're all saying the same thing, which is just trying to find the most efficient way to collate information for the developer, for our community, and for planning. And reports, I think, would be very key to that. And if it means doing a first reading to gather that information. So I guess I'm asking, I'm not really stating anything except asking what is the most efficient way that we can do this for everybody's benefit, to be able to have the information needed to move forward, to make the decisions in a...
Okay. Yeah. And I know do have a couple of requests we could ask for. My understanding is they needed to be asked for prior to second reading, though. Like, which would be an environmental impact assessment, for example. I think that addresses what Councillor DeAndretti is concerned about, and also a report on the impacts of the development in load and bearing capacity on the aquifer prior to second reading. I think that's what I know Council's very interested in that in a general way in our strategic planning discussions, and what we kind of want overall for the next 4 years. So those are some concerns I have, and I'd like to get those going as soon as possible for Council's information and for the public's information. So my question for staff then is that, given option 1 talks about only public engagement before 1 and 2. I don't know if we can do those other things. And I'm hearing from council that it's probably preferential to get some of that information before we go to the public. So I'm asking if those, I guess I'll ask if option 1 would allow for an environmental impact assessment and also more information on the load and bearing capacity. Yeah. And I did see a hand up in the gallery too from the developer. Maybe to clarify something, but I'll go to staff first, but I'll just, yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. So sorry, are you asking if you could get more reports back before first reading? Is that the question?
Yeah, and
Okay.
yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
think that was at least one councillor suggested that we go for option 1, but I'm still concerned that we can't get the information that we would need, or that council and the public are probably looking for without doing first reading first.
Well, you could. So first reading basically gives a nod to the developer that you're interested in this project by putting the bylaw on the table, and a bylaw that explains what is happening. So that's a good step to do in order to go out to the community to say, here's the bylaw, this is the density maximums, minimums, height, all that information is out there. Without it, you can still ask for whatever information you need in order to make this decision. So if at this point council doesn't want to give first reading, you could ask for reports to be brought back to council prior to, if you want to share the information received in those reports, you can ask for those reports prior to engaging the public. I'm not sure if, I guess it depends on the intention of the public engagement. Is it to get it out in the public early and let them know what the proposal is? Or is it to get it out later once you've got more reports to digest and decide how you want to move forward with the project? I'm not sure how long it'll take to get those reports, so it just delays that public engagement piece, and that's something you can think about.
Okay, did you want to speak, Nicole?
Oh, no, I just wanted to speak to, the public hasn't heard about it, because as soon as we decided to take on this project, we announced it on social media, which you may poo-poo and say, well, that's not the public, but it was a huge response that was given about who we were, what we were going to do, and our plans. And then the moment we came out with the plans, we presented it again to the public, who you could go and look on the Longland Development pages and see what the public response is. So it's a small town, everyone knows what's going on. We're well connected in the community, we know a lot of people, we've shown it, so I don't think it's being blindly put forth. I think we've been upfront and, transparent about what we're doing, and we'll do anything we need to do, obviously. We're not and I understand that you would all have PTSD from previous developers with the other things happening, absolutely, I do. From just watching it on the sidelines, I completely understand that, but at the same time, I don't think we need to keep, I don't want to say the word punished, because it's not really punished. I understand why you have to do it that way, but I think that we're not those people, and we've been here forever, and we're good people who do good things for this community, so we're not going to do anything.
I mean, I'll point out here too that it's important to differentiate too, just putting it a different way. The actual OCP change, I mean, I know council in the past has on the waterfront having to consider a considerable OCP amendment. Technically, the OCP amendment on this is that smallest piece of property, 445 that's in front of us there, and the rest of it is actually compliant with the OCP in terms of what the community decided they wanted in that area when the OCP was developed and then updated as the harbor plan. Councillor Kroll?
Thank you, Mayor White, and through you, sir. And just for clarifications, traditionally, I'm the guy who's always said, let's do second reading so we can get it out into the public domain. No, traditionally, in the past, I've always been the keener to get it to second reading so it could get out for public hearings and as much public exposure as possible. But the fact that we've gone to second reading, we're, as Nicole indicated, we're sort of in the firing line. Sometimes you feel like a duck in a shooting gallery. But when we were offered option one, I thought, oh, isn't this great? We can get it out there. I know I've looked at the Longman site. I've worked with, both families. I have no question, but it's public perception and transparency, and that's what we're always battling at the end of the day. So when we were offered up this option, I thought, this is perfect. We can get it out there, get the discussion. If procedurally we're obligated to, in asking for additional information to take it to first reading, then so be it. I'm quite happy to move that.
I mean, I'll just respond quickly to say, we need to change that history. I think our council needs to change that history that we've been talking about today, and we need to change that process that you're talking about, Councillor Kroll, where it's not until after second reading that we go to a public hearing, which is really looking at the very end product of a development that you go to the public like that, and that's a disastrous, unsatisfactory process province-wide. And I know I've heard from a lot of local governments, I've heard from developers as well who find that process very unsatisfactory and problematic. So I just say I'm listening to council on this, but I think whether we do first reading or not, we need to do public participation differently before second reading. I think that whether it's before first and second reading, whatever that means in the option one, or whether it's between first and second. I saw staff's hand up too, maybe for some clarification on this.
Sure, thank you, Mayor. So option one basically asks for more information before first and second reading. You can give first and second reading in the same meeting. The next step after that would be to hold a public hearing. So if you want to give second reading later, you could ask for more information prior to second reading and put this bylaw on the table. With the bylaw on the table, if there is public engagement or public consultation, we can share the proposed amending bylaws. So that's the benefit to giving first reading now. But if you wanted to tweak option one, you could say prior to first and second readings, or first. It depends on if you want more information. You can always get more information throughout the process. So at this point, the recommendation is to do first and second reading in future. But what I'm trying to say is, you could, if you didn't feel comfortable passing any readings, you could say prior to the next reading, you want to receive an environmental impact assessment, or you want an environmental impact assessment to be completed, a report on the impacts of the development on the aquifer, and a public information meeting be completed. So you could ask for certain things to be done before it comes to council for another decision.
Okay, Councillor DeAndrade.
Thank you, Mayor. I think on the aspect of being effective, and we were just discussing today, to me, in this because of the site, it could be the development could not necessarily occur the way that is designed, right? This is not a regular site. I feel a little bit like, why we go to the public gives feedback, and then we receive the reports and we find out that we cannot even, that locations have to be changed and perhaps height. So I'm finding this process a little bit counterproductive. I would prefer receiving the reports, staff provides the analysis, and if it's feasible, at least the project as it is, like technically speaking, then we start the process. If it's not, it basically has to go back to the table. So that's the kind of challenge that I'm finding now.
Okay, Councillor Lumley?
Is there a restrictive timeline if you do give first reading? Like, are we under some sort of time budget at that point, or no? No, okay.
So I guess, I'm hearing from council, I guess, so far, option one is there. It seems to kind of imply that we might do first and second reading at the same time, though, which I don't think anybody wants. So, Councillor Lumley?
Yeah, okay, I think I'm okay even with option, and I completely agree. If the community's behind it, then you're gonna find out right away, and then you can get the reports before second reading, right? You could put it back on the table and go, okay, first reading, done, and then you could say, not that a massive bodies at the market's gonna make up, shouldn't make up our minds, but at least you'll have the confidence, and the community will have the confidence that you actually, gave them the opportunity for input. I think that's really important. But then, from what I understand, is then you would move first reading, and then you'd have all those reports prior to second reading. I don't know if I don't want to do first and second reading at once. That's for sure. That's take that off the table.
Councillor Thompson.
I like the option, sorry. I like the option of doing our first reading with conditions that we want met, which are the reports, meeting with the public before our second reading.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm hearing that now as a direction. Is that the rest of the council agreeable to that? Councillor DeAndretti?
Just a clarification, we are talking about DPA 1, 2, and 9. Well,
That are all
these
being
all
reviewed right now,
environmental
or?
reports. Yeah, I think these are environmental reports, because one.
The wording I have suggested, there's already some drilling assessment, right? What CAO?
There's no drilling, there's just a proposal for some drilling to
Right.
be conducted, but we're reviewing that approach at the moment.
So there's a proposal for drilling that's already being reviewed. And then secondly, the wording I've been given is an environmental impact assessment, which I guess the question is, would that, because we're not doing development permits for DPAs, the DPAs at this point. That would be later in the process, but would an environmental impact assessment, I guess, is the question would be, does that address the concerns you're bringing up, Councillor? Okay.
No, may I respond?
Sure.
Through you, Mayor. Well, so now I'm even more confused, because my understanding, the DPA 1, 9, and 2 are exactly for us to understand the impact of the project, and if we can even consider going ahead with this particular project as it is. So to me, what kind of environmental assessment we are going to have is not going to be sufficient to address this particular site.
Yeah, sorry, it's just really basic that development permits come after the readings, like, isn't it? Like, that's been my entire experience as a councillor. Like, you can't ask for development permits before council's approved of a development. CAO Machado?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, just for clarity, so and correct me if I'm wrong, Leslie, but the drilling program that was proposed, it's so that they're trying to understand what the ground conditions are and sort of what is going to support the building as proposed. We're still looking at that approach, so that's not an environmental assessment in itself. It's related to, it's more under the water regulation bylaw that we're following that process. So it's not sort of a step that has been undertaken sort of ahead on any council authorization to proceed. We recognize that it would be perfect, it would be ideal for your consideration to have all of the plans that need to be done ahead of time. But that's really is the crux of this piece, is that there needs to be certain lining up of, for folks to proceed, these folks or others, there's time and money to be spent on assessments, and there's a bit of a give and take of move forward, some do assessments, proceed or not. So, and that's really for council to determine what that is. So right now, we've got, do we do all the assessments first before any approval? Do we give some approval with some assessments? And that's, we've got to find something that works for council and for the development community as well.
Councillor Kroll.
Thank you, Mayor White. And just for clarification, my understanding was that the reports that we're asking for are site-specific to these properties, which would cover aspects of DPA 1, DPA 2, and DPA 9. Is that not correct?
Staff.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to remind council about the development permit report process, it's legislated under the Local Government Act, and in our OCP it establishes when development permits are required. So it's prior to subdivision, prior to building or construction, and prior to land alteration. It's not prior to rezoning. Rezoning is a land use decision for the site. So whatever the property is rezoned for, it will require those development permits anyway. That said, council can ask for whatever information you need in order to make this land use decision. So the environmental impact assessment or the environmental assessment, that's a policy in the OCP that says we should get an environmental assessment for rezonings. If council wants that, that will be a separate report. It's not going to follow the guidelines in the development permit criteria in the DPAs, because that's going to be followed at a future time. So it'll probably look at the proposal and the environmental impact of the development, the land use on that site, not necessarily the details of how it's going to impact the aquifer or anything else, unless that's information that council specifically asks for as a condition of or in prior to second reading.
Thanks for that clarification. I've been drinking too much water and coffee today, so I need to take we've been 2 hours now, so I need to take a break. We could have a recess, or Councillor Kroll, if you just want to chair. Does anyone else need a break? Okay, let's just go ahead. Yeah. You're chairing.
Okay, thank you, Mayor White. Councillor Lumley, was there something you wanted to say there?
My question is for planning. Are the zoning bylaw updates, they're just bringing it in line with the OCP, what the current OCP accepts?
Director of Planning?
Sorry, do you mind saying that again?
The zoning amendment bylaws are actually bringing it in line with the OCP.
That's correct.
Is that correct? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Any other questions?
Well, I would move with some adjustments to option 2. I would move it, but I'm going to wait till probably wait till these guys return from. Yeah.
Okay. At this point, welcome to our wonderful world here. It's I think we've got this track history of our image of transparency or lack thereof as perceived by the public. So I think some of the things that we're asking for upfront, it's to mitigate that. Unfortunately, I think you've probably are first in line with how we're trying to realign things. So we're not picking on you by any means. It's I think it's a growing exercise for all of us that hopefully will make things in the future a lot easier and a lot smoother for everyone.
So we figured that it's all out while I was gone? Okay. So I think, we have this, I want to clarify too, this is on the agenda. It's intentionally on the council agenda as an option for council. So as long as we've kind of figured out what we're doing, we don't need to make a recommendation that will then have to make staff, we've got 2 hours to run around amending the agenda and stuff. I see nods from, so we don't need to make a recommendation from committee that'll go to council. We'll just be ready at council to make the motion then, because it's on our agenda, about how we want to go forward. And I know, I think part of the interest that I'm hearing from council is to ask that an environmental impact assessment be completed prior to second reading, along with any, if we're going ahead with first reading. Furthermore, I'm hearing that a public information meeting be held by the developer, and further that the town also hold a public dialogue session, perhaps in coordination. I could see that working well, where there's a bit of a separation there where the developer can make their presentation and have people come in and see it, and then we can do some dialogue with the community. And then thirdly, that that the impacts of the development in load and bearing capacity on the aquifer also be a report on that also be completed. Yeah, Councillor DeAndretti?
Mayor, I would like a clarification, because I heard, in my understanding, what I would like to see, it's the DPA 1, 2, and I know the 9 is already in process.
The clarification's been given. It's that it's the law that maybe I'm wrong here, but I don't believe a developer can even really apply. Can a developer apply for a development permit prior to council approving?
Yes, so they have applied for DPA 9 to do the site investigation, because the proposal is to do some drilling, so it would be land alteration, which would trigger that DP requirement.
Okay. So then it can be issued.
If it meets our DP guidelines and our water regulation bylaw, then it could be issued.
Okay.
So at this point, it's under a peer review, and we haven't issued any permits yet.
Okay, Councillor Andretti.
So we could request a DPA 1 and 2 as well. So we pass, then I'm in favor to have the first reading, because now we are asking something that it's unusual to ask at this stage, but the site is unusual as well. Then we request the completion of DPA 1 and 9. And I would also like to bring to attention, because our infrastructure department recommended even the flood construction level to be 5.9, but the report is from 2017, and given the pace of climate change and the change, this should also be reviewed. So perhaps a peer review of the current report that identify flood construction level at 5.35 should be also reviewed. If we want to do this after, but I think this is all part of the project. So I would like certainty that, okay, at least this project is viable from the point of view of aquifer safety, environmental safety, and so on.
Okay. I guess we'll try to work that out between now and
Thank you.
council meeting. Councillor Lumley?
And that will be prior to the second reading. Is that what you're saying? Does it have to be included in this motion for?
No, we're not passing a motion.
Okay.
Because then there's already a draft motion on the council agenda, and we can amend that to our heart's content. That was in recognition that this is kind of the preliminary step, and there was a possibility of just doing this in committee and then waiting for like making a recommendation in committee and then waiting 2 weeks before we actually, which we can also still do. But no, I'm seeing no, we've had the discussion and we can set the direction this evening. So now, were there any other questions? Yeah, okay,
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, just a quick question. I'm just trying to capture the notes in preparation for tonight. Does council want that public, if you give first reading and move forward with recommending a public info meeting before second reading, do you want that timed after the reports are received, or do you want that earlier?
that's a good question that we can, yeah. Councillor D'Andretti?
I have a suggestion. I know this is unusual because in this regard, we will say, well, put the proposal, but what I believe it will be a wise thing to do, we communicate with our public, because this is a site with specific conditions, that we would wait for the report. And after we understand the report, that is, if it's safe, then we do, because the public has been, like she mentioned, a lot of people have been seeing this project. I mean, we can do the public engagement, but I almost, like, we are talking about things that we don't even know if we can build. So in this regard, I thought.
Well, we know we can build, right? Anything can be done with engineering, but it's very, yeah, it can be very costly, depending on, very impractical and costly in certain cases, for sure. And I heard that from Councillor Thompson too, that the concept that the reports would be done first. Was that correct earlier?
Correct in I'd like to, I don't know enough about the process necessarily to say what pressure we're putting. I want to find an efficient way to do it. So when I say an efficient way, I want to make sure that we're not taxing everybody involved in this process, including, our staff, in how much work is being put into a process before we actually are ready to take it to the public. So it's just that chicken and the egg, finding that balance.
Okay. Well, that's where I hear councillors are leaning right now, but we'll need to clarify that for sure when we make the motion at the council meeting. And we have we do really need to get. We also have another item on the agenda. We need to get moving. Mr. Baker wants to ask a question, and I just ask you to be quick if you can. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Council. So I guess I'm the only member of the public here this afternoon. So we do want to be engaged, and the fact is, once Council has done a first reading, the perception of that is that the railroad is now running and the endpoint's already been determined. I strongly suggest and recommend that Council not do the first reading until there's been some public interaction. And in fact, the town of Gibsons has this amazing product called the Public Participation Toolkit that addresses how council and staff can interact with the public and with the developers, so that by the time the public hearing comes along, it's a non-event.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, that's what we were talking about, definitely, to do that between first and second. Yeah.
Aberration. We don't want another, debacle in the town. It's really heartening to know that these are local developers and they have, the interests of the town at heart. But I'm really strongly suggesting that the first reading not be done tonight until all the information is gathered and the public's had a chance to become involved.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Baker. I guess I strongly disagree with that perception that first reading is like a fait accompli, like it's done. I've been in processes before where we've done a first reading and nothing else ever happened because the developer couldn't actually comply with some of the conditions we set on the development. And that's, in order to get to that point, we needed to do the first reading. So, yeah, I mean, if that is the perception of some people, we've got to change it. We've got to be different and change that perception and do more work between our first and second readings in order to engage the public and and get more information. We've got a motion to close now that we need. Councillor DeAndrade, seconded by Councillor Kroll, and that is a motion to close in accordance with sections 91J and K of the Community Charter, and that's information that's prohibited or information that were presented in a document would be prohibited from disclosure under Section 21 of the Freedom of Information and Privacy Act. And K is negotiations and related discussions respecting the proposed provision of a municipal service in the preliminary stages. And all those in favor of the motion? The motion carries. So the meeting's closed now. Yeah,
Thank you,
thanks.
Chair.
Thanks.